Hello everyone, welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel, and this is the 2022 edition of Serving as a Referee for the AAS Journals. I've been a scientific editor since 2008, a lead editor of a topical corridor since 2016, and associate editor-in-chief since 2022. And over that time period, I've probably been involved in something like 5,000 peer review processes. So when I say the AAS journals, what I mean by that are these seven. The AJ, APJ, Letters, Supplement, PSJ, Planetary Science Journal, BAAS, and Research Notes. So on the refereeing processes, the AJ, the APJ family, PSJ, these have formal peer review processes. So mainly what I'll be talking about are these journals today. You can get a refereed article in the bulletin of the AAS. I've done one, so it is possible to do one. And then Research Notes is moderated. So most of my comments today will be about these 5 journals right here. So a critical mission of the AAS journals is to increase the scientific integrity of the field. And one mechanism to do that is to conduct peer review processes of submitted manuscripts. And so for the AAS journals, our journals specialize in manuscripts presenting significant new results applied directly to astrophysical systems. This has remarkable brevity for what it says and what it doesn't say. So on the things that it does say, it tells you that the primary metric for publication in the AAS journals is significant new results. What it doesn't say is that everything we publish is correct. We're not the journal of correct results. This is science at the bleeding edge, and there will be some that will be more correct in the future than others. Okay? But we're going to keep coming back to this significant new results because that's the primary metric for publication. So I have about 7 topics to talk about during the review process. So one is just what is the goal of the peer review process, is who serves as a referee, how often should I referee, how should I prepare to do a report, how to write a good referee report, what service does a referee provide to the community, and I'll end up with some do's and don'ts. Okay, so let's start off with what is the goal of the peer review process. So the goal of the peer review process, as practiced by the community, is to improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. To improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. That's the practice. And this is reflected in the acceptance rate for the journals, which is about 85% or so. A little bit less for letters, 50%. But similar rates hold for our sister journals, MNRAS and ANA. And thus, overall, the process should be viewed as constructive. And if you're wondering where that other 15% is to bring it up to 100%, by the end of this chat, you will know the full 100% on where the remaining 15% goes. So we receive on average about 100 new submissions each week. And the arrival date correlates with proposal seasons, academic calendars, and various international holidays. And on shorter time scales, there's sort of like a Monday effect, where you see a significant increase in the number of new submissions or revisions coming in. And of those 100 that come in, roughly 5% or so of these new submissions are stopped at the gate, and they are not sent out for review. So now we're up to 90%, so that 85 that is accepted, 5% that don't make it past the gate, and we'll come to the other 10%. But usually these manuscripts are just appropriate for another science journal. It may be a great piece of science, wonderful piece of science, but it's just not AAS journal material. Comment papers, because that's not a significant new result on what somebody thinks about something other piece of work. Okay, that's not a significant new result. So we don't do comment papers. Those will get turned down at the gate. And then we do get submissions that are just not suitable for publication in any scientific journal. Crank papers. Okay. So that's 5%. Manuscripts that do enter the peer review process are then checked with the text overlap tool, and there's a lot more to say about that in the sister video to this one, which is on publishing as an author. So I'll put a link to that video below in the description. Manuscripts with a significant statistical component are then previewed by the AAS statistics editor, and manuscripts with a software, and what astronomy doesn't use software or data these days, component are previewed by the AAS data editors. And I just want to call attention, these last two are value adds to the AAS journal peer review process. We have statistics editors, data editors. Your manuscript is getting a lot of eyes on it. Okay. So that manuscript comes in, it is got some checks, and a topical corridor is then chosen by the author, or it's reassigned by one of the lead editors. And these are the 7 corridors that we go through: galaxies and cosmology, high energy and fundamental physics, that's the one I am the lead editor for, stars and stellar physics, solar system, exoplanet and astrobiology, interstellar matter and the local universe, the sun and heliosphere, and then instrumentation, software, laboratory astrophysics, and data. And so these corridors roughly align with, pretty closely align with IAU divisions. So that goes down a topical corridor with one of those lead editors, and that lead editor then assigns a scientific editor. And there's these days 25-ish scientific editors for the AAS journals here on July 31st, 2022. So a scientific editor then chooses the referees, supervises the peer review process, adjudicates any impasses, and then makes the final accept, reject decision. Not the referee, the scientific editor. So the scientific editor is expected to have a broad general knowledge of the subject that the manuscript is about, and it is the referee who is expected to be an expert in the field. And that is a little bit on what is the goal, okay? To improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. So when a scientific editor is looking for potential referees, who is considered? Who's possibly a referee? Well, we consider every publishing author as a potential referee, and this usually means a subject matter expert, typically past the post-PhD level, although I've been using the occasional graduate student who's about to graduate, has a few papers going, and I have done that. And then there's a list of things that would fall under objectivity concerns. So not somebody who's a previous co-author with the authors, not somebody from the same institution, clearly that doesn't work, not someone who's known to be a mortal enemy of some group, and not someone who is known to be a close colleague or published many papers in the past for them. So these are objectivity concerns, and so we try and filter that out as you start searching for a potential referee. And referees are expected to reveal potential conflict of interest. We don't know everybody who is a student of somebody or a postdoc at some point, or moved institutions. We don't keep up with that. And so referees, if you've got a conflict of interest, state it up front that you're best friends with this person or something. Okay. So when the scientific editor has selected potential referee, then the process of securing a referee begins. And that securing can take a little while. And there's a few reasons why it can take a little while. So first of all, we're all very busy people. And a quality report, 100% best quality, takes time. Okay. Specialized manuscripts that may have very small communities, measured in, let's say, the 10. And large collaborations with collaborations of several thousand that can consume most of the relevant community. Both of those can be a little challenging to find expert referees to do, and sometimes that just takes a little bit of time. There are other factors as well, such as holidays, academic schedules, and so on. Okay, so if you are asked, consider it to be an honor to be asked to serve the community as a referee. Referee requests are sent based on expertise and publications, and so if you get a request to referee, you are considered to have that expertise to be able to review the manuscript. So it's an honor. Okay. When you receive your referee request, you can ask yourself 3 questions. Okay. So the first question, when I get this request, Frank, please review this journal article. And so I will ask myself 3 things. Number 1, am I an expert? Do you know the topic well enough to assess the significant new results of the research, right? Primary metric, again, significant new results for publication in the AAS journals. Can you assess the quality of the research? Can you assess the impact and importance of the research? If the answer to any of these sub-questions is no, then tell the scientific editor that you decline. And if you want, why? It is also helpful, if you do decline, to suggest other potential referees. That's just being nice. Second question, will I be able to meet the due date? Now, it's understood that some manuscripts take longer than others. A 4-page article will take a lot less time than a 50-page APJ supplement coming through. And so it depends on the complexity of the manuscript. But ask yourself realistically if you're going to be able to make the due date. And authors, of course, want their report as soon as possible, but you can think of your own manuscripts in that regard. But it's okay to ask for more time. 3 weeks is typical on the first iteration, but if you need 4 weeks, just raise it with the scientific editor and probably something will work out. Okay. Third one, do I have a conflict of interest? If you're a colleague of the author's, helped with the research. I've had cases where somebody helped with the research and I was suddenly surprised to find out that they were being asked to referee the paper. So it does happen. Or feel that you might be in direct competition, and that has to be a direct competition, not just, I work in this broad topic, and so this paper's in the broad topic, and so I have a conflict of interest. That's not a conflict of interest. That's exactly the expertise that is being sought. So it has to be a direct competition. Then just let the scientific editor know. We do have professional and ethical standards for the AAS journals. I give the URL down there. I'll also put that URL in the description below the video. So even a potential referee has ethical responsibilities. One is just to reciprocate the community that reviews your manuscripts. So turnabout is fair play in this game. And number two, a potential referee is a privileged reader who usually has access to confidential information. And what do I mean by confidential information of a potential referee? Well, an abstract usually has enough information for a potential referee to decide whether they want to review the paper or decline. And an abstract can convey enough information for an unethical person to abuse the process and try to publish first. This rarely happens in the astronomy community, thankfully. Again, we have ethics that spell this out for both authors and for referees. So again, that link will be in the description below the video. There are about roughly 10 to the 4 astro people, and thus figuring an average paper rate of 1 per year is kind of a lower bound maybe, of about 10 to the 4 articles per year. And there are several top-tier astrophysics, engineering, and software journals that send referee requests. And so the number of referee requests is usually going to correlate more with the more visible the researcher is. And that person isn't always going to be available. They're not suddenly going to shift into reviewing for all journals all the time anymore. So securing a referee is a process. And it's not a random process, but there is a certain stochastic element to it on who's available when and things of that nature. So yeah, that's a little bit on who is a referee. If you've published, you're a potential referee. How often should I referee? At least twice a year. 2 times would be good. That will help keep things in a steady state of manuscripts coming in and manuscripts reviewed. So guideline is that you agree to review a manuscript for the AAS journals twice a year. There are some reviewers who review more than twice a year. And if you're curious what the upper end of that tail looks like, this is the number of referees who will review, for example, 4 manuscripts a year. And this is over 137 total referees in this histogram. And this was data I took between July 4th, 2016 and July 4th, 2019. So a 3-year spread. I don't think it's changed a whole lot since 2022, although it would be interesting to do it again. So there's about 45 or so referees who do 4 a year. About half of that, 15 or so, that do 5 a year. And yes, we do have some people up here in the 8 and even 16. That's an average of more than one per month going through. So there is a tail to the distribution, and now you know what it looks like. Okay. And on the other end of the spectrum, to those who review a whole lot, then there are those who don't review at all. There is the occasional author who does this. And manuscripts by those authors do consume the community's time and effort and resources. And I think it's a little uncollegial to deny the community some reciprocity on turnabout being fair play in this game. If you're going to submit and publish, you should referee for the community as well. On the other hand, it's super rewarding as a scientific editor when a referee accepts, provides a quality report, and expresses gratitude for contributing to the community. So how often should I referee? Twice a year. So now you've got the manuscript and you're going to start going through it. And I just want to throw out some guidelines on what to look for as you first read through the manuscript. Before you write anything, you're going to go through the manuscript once, twice, 3, 4, more than that times as you gather thoughts on the manuscript. And so just a couple of guidelines as you go through that. Are there significant new results? The primary metric for publication in the AAS journals. Yes or no? Maybe, partially, somewhat. Do the authors adequately explain why and what their significant new results are? Sometimes authors will not put what their significant new results are. Typical place to do it is in the introduction. And so it can be kind of difficult to tell what their significant new results are just from reading the manuscript. So are they up forward enough to say what their significant new results are in the manuscript? Have parts of the manuscript been published before? This gets the idea of being incremental and not significant and new. And how relevant is the work to other researchers in the field? Is this a party of 1,000 or is this a party of 1? And again, getting back to the incremental. We don't want to do incremental advances. We do significant new results applied to astrophysical systems. So ask yourself that question as you go through, yes or no, maybe, partway. Second question, is the work understandable and is it correct? Is it clear what the authors are trying to achieve to get their significant new results? Are there sufficient references to provide background, usually in the intro, and to put the work in context of work prior? Are the results backed up with evidence? Are there unsupported claims? Are there any errors, flaws, or mistakes? Are the mathematics correct? Are the statistics correct? And at the end, do you understand the work? Is it communicated clearly enough so that you, the reader, the referee, can understand the work? And that gets into, is the work well presented? Does the title reflect the actual contents of the manuscript? Sometimes there can be a disconnect there. Does the abstract contain the essential information? It's the preview of the movie, right? So is the preview of the movie succinct enough, but yet capture the entire manuscript? Are the figures and tables correct, and are they informative? Do you need this table? Do you need this figure? Maybe you should have 2 or 3 of these figures, whichever way it goes on those things. Do the conclusions summarize what has been learned and why the significant new results are interesting? Okay. Again, significant new results. Is the language clear? Is the manuscript the appropriate length? Maybe it's too short. Maybe this should be expanded, or that section should be expanded. Maybe it's too long, and this section should be cut out, or maybe move to an appendix or something along those lines. But you can be too short and you can be too long. Okay, so that's just help you some guidelines as you go through a manuscript for review. Peer review, some items to keep in mind as you go through. And now it's time to actually write the report. And so now I want to talk a bit about that, about writing not just a referee report, a good referee report. So we all want to write good referee reports, and we also all want to receive good referee reports. So put out what you would like to see. Do a good one. So start your report by summarizing the purpose and the results of the manuscript. This shows both the authors and the scientific editor that you read and you understood the work. Okay? And then give your opinion if the manuscript contains the primary metric for publication in the AA's journals, significant new results. Okay? So does it? Does it not? Incremental, halfway. Be specific about what is interesting or good about the manuscript. It is very rare to have a manuscript that is all 100% bad. Hopefully those got filtered out a long time ago at the gate, but sometimes things sneak through or they're dressed enough where it looks okay. But in general, the vast majority of manuscripts that go through the peer review process, there's something good about them. So say what is good and positive about the manuscript, but be specific about it. By the same token, be specific in any criticism. Don't just say, this result is wrong or it's all been done before. Okay, say why it is wrong. Back up any criticism with evidence. Give specific references, counter examples. The mathematics is incorrect, but be specific in that criticism and what is good about the manuscript. And I think perhaps most importantly about a referee report is to clearly say what changes are needed to reach the goal of the peer review process, to improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. What changes are going to be necessary to improve the manuscript and ultimately arrive at publication if you think the manuscript could eventually be published. Okay? Very important to say what changes need to be made. Don't intone it or expect the scientific editor and the authors to read between the lines. Clearly say what changes are needed. Provide full references to earlier work if you believe the research doesn't add much. So if it's all been done before, provide some references on that all been done before. Provide some full references that the authors may have missed inadvertently often, or that the cited references are not really appropriate for that given passage in the manuscript. In other words, they're inaccurate given the context of the paragraph that they're in. In your referee reports, please avoid saying that authors must include references to 10 of your articles or must discuss unrefereed, unpublished manuscripts. Okay, the first one is known as citation stuffing. Don't do that. That gets a flame. Discussing a conference proceeding somewhere, unrefereed, unpublished, that's also inappropriate. That'll get you a flame. When you write your report, be civil, professional, and polite. Review the research, not the researchers. Okay? Do not make, imply, insinuate, or otherwise indirectly make personal comments or criticize the authors as individuals or as a group. That'll get you 3 flames. That will get you some attention you don't want. Okay? So don't do this in your report. Be professional. Be polite. Be civil. Okay? We're talking about the manuscript, the research, not the authors. Okay? Is the English understandable? We are an international journal. We get manuscripts coming from around the world, and English may not be everyone's primary day-to-day language. And so there's no need for the referee to correct every spelling or grammatical error in the report. We do have copy editors. That's what they're for. However, it is useful to point out where the language may obscure the scientific meaning. That is much more important. If the language is not clear on what the science is doing, that's different than grammatical checks or spelling checks generally as you go through. So talk about, is the English acceptable? And finally, you should make a concrete recommendation about the manuscript. Should it be accepted now at this iteration? Maybe it's first iteration, second iteration, third iteration, whatever it may be, but accept or revise. And there's a lot of gray area in that revise minor stuff, revise major stuff. Maybe it's a mix of major and minor, but revise or reject. And again, if you're going to recommend that, boy, you better come with some evidence on why that is. But don't be wimpy with a recommendation of let the community decide to sort of give a favorable impression of a manuscript that you know is weak. If you think a manuscript is weak, it's incremental, say so, recommend reject. And that doesn't necessarily mean that reject happens immediately. Anytime a reject comes in, it gets extra attention. And so there may be some back and forth between the scientific editor and the referee if that's your recommendation. Okay. The goal, after you get the manuscript, is to submit your report within generally 3 weeks for the AAH journals, shorter for the letters, 10 days for letters, if you've agreed to do the review. And some referees have been known to disappear at this stage at 3 weeks. They just go radio silent, there is no communication, and this is just bad behavior. There's no other way to say that. Referees are anonymous by default. Okay, and there's a whole video on anonymity and why we do anonymity, and I'll put a link to that video below the description, and that one is probably due for a 2022 update as well. So if a referee wishes to waive anonymity and the scientific editor agrees, then direct correspondence between the authors and the referee is still not allowed. Okay, it's to be a two-way street on that peer review. Okay, so things to remember: keep it confidential. Peer review process. Do not contact the authors. Let the scientific editor be the intermediary, because ultimately that scientific editor is making the decision. And review the research, not the researchers. Review the research, not the researcher. Researchers. Okay, so that's, if you do all that, you will have a good referee report. And we do get lots of good referee reports come in. We also get some that are not so great. And so that was a little guidance on helping you write a good referee report. And so once you do this, what am I doing this? What service am I providing to the community in exchange for the ones that I submit in my articles? So generally, I'm also under confidentiality. I'm not to discuss any details of any specific peer review process, those 5,000 I've been involved in, but I will share one referee report with you. Okay, and it was the shortest referee report I ever handled. No. I don't know why capital N was necessary. There's no period at the end. And that was the totality of the report. So obviously, this is not a good referee report, and a good referee report serves both the authors, think about yourself when you get a referee report, and the scientific editor. For the authors, it provides an independent, critical reading of the manuscript. Sometimes you're in an echo chamber and it sounds really good when you write it, and the people around you, oh, it sounds really great, and when somebody else reads it, or it's not really clear what the significant new results are. And so that's a value. That's the point of the peer review check. Okay, so a good report will suggest improvements to arrive at publication, advise contractions or expansion. There's a little too much here, too many figures there. It flags weak or unstated assumptions, and it notes sloppy or nebulous presentations. Sometimes manuscripts come in and it's pretty clear that maybe were slapped together inside of 24 hours and it looks like it. And so note that kind of sloppiness on the submission. Okay, going forward. So on the scientific editor side, a good report signals where there may be issues. It duplicates submission to another journal. That has definitely happened. Yeah, that's an ethical issue. Text overlap, improper citations or misrepresentations of the literature. Are there redundancies, including incremental extensions of insignificant significance, right? Significant new results is the metric, or just has basic errors, whatever the nature of those errors might be. So a good report says what is positive about the manuscript and flags potential issues. And the report is read by the scientific editor, who may ask the referee to clarify their recommendation or an issue raised in the report. So there is very typically a back and forth between the scientific editor and the referee to make sure everything is understood before the scientific editor makes a decision on what that next step is going to be. Okay. A good report is also civil, professional, and reviews the research and not the researcher. If a report is uncivil, too strong, or the language is poor, it will be redacted or edited by the scientific editor before being sent to the authors. And this definitely does happen. Reports do get edited, okay, or redacted. And on average, a good report ranges from just a few paragraphs to several pages in length. There's not a one-size-fits-all here. It depends on the manuscript, the length of the manuscript, the state of the manuscript when it's submitted. And I really want to stress that it's the quality of the referee report, not its length, that is the metric of a good report. I've handled excellent quality reports that ranged from just a few paragraphs to some reports that were even longer than the manuscript itself. I think we have one example of a bad referee report where it's just one word, no punctuation whatsoever. So there is a huge spectrum, and it really just depends on a lot of issues. But don't feel like you have to submit 5 pages of report. Okay. So there is an iterative process that's part of engaging the community, and that closure, a decision is reached after 2 or 3 iterations on a time scale of months. A lot of that depends on the length of time it takes an author to respond to a referee report. Sometimes authors are very quick and the report is pretty mild, and so it just takes a few weeks and authors will turn it around on several week time scales. Other authors will take upwards of near the maximum 6 months before they submit, even to a relatively mild report. So there's a huge variation in how long it takes authors to submit a report. I would say about 5% of the submissions that came in are abandoned at some point during the peer review process. So this now brings us up to 95%, 85% accepted, 5% don't make it at the gate, 5% for whatever reason are abandoned during the peer review process. It could be that they got a negative report and they just decide don't want to deal with it, or that they realize they have too much work to do. And so after 6 months, that by policy deadline, that's when you start contacting the authors, and if there's no response or they have no plans, then the manuscript is withdrawn, either by the authors themselves or by the scientific editor. So roughly about 5% fall into this category. So in a stalemate, the scientific editor may seek another referee on their own, or grant an author's request for a second referee, or just make a decision. If another referee is sought, they are usually asked for an independent, clean sheet, independent review, and they are sometimes informed about the nature of the impasse or the lack of convergence with the first referee. And when all is said and done, roughly about 5% of new submissions are rejected as a result of the peer review process, and that brings us to the roughly 100%. 85% accepted, 5% don't make it out the gate, 5% are just abandoned by the authors, and 5% are rejected. Okay? And the scientific editors serve as arbitrators, mediators, and eventually as judges in the peer review process. Referees provide input into that decision process, but referees don't make the decisions. They provide recommendations and input. Ultimately, it's the scientific editor who has to make the decision on the manuscript. Okay? That is a little bit about the service that your referee report helps the authors and the scientific editors. And I just want to close with a couple of sort of final do's and don'ts as we go through the peer review process. So do send your report on or before the agreed deadline. Contact scientific editor if you're going to be late. The scientific editor is happy to hear from you. Contact them if you have any questions. When you write the report, say what is interesting, important, novel, and significant new results in the manuscript. Be unbiased, be objective. Talk about the manuscript. Okay? Give your recommendation, accept, revise, and reject. Don't do nothing. If you are unwilling to referee a manuscript, just tell the scientific editor. Don't agree to provide a report and then fail to send it. Contact scientific editor, ask for more time. Let's see what it takes to bring this in, but don't disappear. Don't contact the authors. Ask the scientific editor to relay communications between the two. That's the mediator role, the arbitrator role. It's what helps inform the decision. So ask the scientific editor to relay the communications. Don't make claims about a manuscript one way or the other without an explanation and evidence. Do not personally criticize the authors as individuals or as a group. Okay? Or make a recommendation without giving a reason. My one-word report. No, okay, don't do that. All right. And I want to close off by going back to the beginning on just a reminder on what the goal of the peer review process is. The goal of the peer review process, as practiced by the community, is to improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. And these are all the different flags that a football or soccer referee may use to help get from the referee to the goal of arriving at publication. That will do on this 2022 edition, and we will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.